It's the Boris Dirk podcast. Welcome back, everybody. We are thrilled to be joined by a very special guest today, Sean Davis. You'll know him from his NBA coverage on Twitter. He's also the host of the Sports Headline Show podcast, which you can get everywhere, and also a coach. So, Coach, how you doing today? Glad to have you on.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me on. I'm super excited. And yeah, basketball is almost back. Weird part of the year we're gonna get football and basketball, so we are eating right now.
Drew, as always, my co-host.
Excited to talk tiers going into the season today because I got really angry listening to last year's like playoff bracket prediction we did. I'm like, why would we ever do that? It's such a pointless exercise, especially in a league that feels like it's had more parity than like, I guess the years we were in college where it was just Cavs Warriors every year and like supremacy at the top. And because there's more parity, I think playoffs have become so matchup dependent. So I think it's much more interesting to talk about tiers and maybe matchups within those tiers. But yeah, pumped to hash this out.
And yeah, so we'll just get into it. Drew and I have both made tier lists out of all the teams in the NBA. We're going to spend most of the time focusing on the teams at the top because they're the most interesting. But as we go through, there's still some teams in the bad tiers and the mid tiers that should at least still be interesting to watch this year. So I'm going to start with my bottom tier, which I call the abject poverty tier.
I'm not sure this tier is politically correct, but also like, I guess we need
So
some virality out here.
so
Yeah.
it's cool because for people wondering like why I don't have like my own tier made, I'm doing like my own in-depth power ranking series. But like
Yeah.
the bottom tier I've like covered already. So I'm pretty curious to see how you guys is match up.
All right. So I think there's four teams. We can also call this the SAG for flag tier. There's four teams that are really going to be in the contention for number one spot in the lottery this year, I think. You can make an argument for five, but those four teams to me are the Wizards, the
Yeah.
Portland Trail Blazers,
Okay.
the Utah Jazz, and the Chicago Bulls.
I made six tiers.
Okay.
I had a seventh tier, which is just Nets and Wizards, because I do think those two teams are even another half step below everyone else. And I might put Vegas and Seattle above the Nets and Wizards, and they don't even exist yet.
So, yeah, the Nets were borderline for me. I didn't really know what to do with them because I feel like they have guys I respect as NBA players in terms of Finney Smith, Cam Johnson, Claxton, Schroeder. Cam Thomas is divisive, but those are like five real NBA players in the starting lineup. I do think they'll probably trade two of Finney Smith, Cam Johnson, and Nick Claxton, in which case they would most certainly be in the bottom tier. But Sean, it seemed like you thought Brooklyn should be like bottom.
I have Brooklyn as the worst team in the league in my power ranking
Yeah.
series. Like they're dead last for me. I think actually it's also like more or less. I think they should want to be the worst team in the league. Like if Brooklyn is the sixth worst team in the league this year, they failed this year. Like this year needs to be completely about let's be the worst. Let's be worse than the Pistons last year. Like that's how nasty this thing should be. And go get yourself Cooper Flag. I the other there's a couple other teams like the Wizards and Blazers. I completely agree. They're also like my complete bottom tier. Although the Blazers would be like a fun bad. They'll be like
Yeah.
I like Scoot still. Shaden Sharp is super fun. Anthony Simons is a fun like bucket getter. I think Jeremy Grant from a skill set standpoint kind of gets underrated. Tamari Kamara is fun. So like they have some fun pieces, but like again they're bad. Chauncey's the worst coach in the league in my opinion. Utah is in my tier above, but like still like frisky, kind of like bad. I can understand for sure putting Utah in this bottom tier though.
Utah is trying to toe that line where like they keep their one borderline elite player and still lose a lot of games, hold on to him and hopefully still have him when you're pretty good again. Let the young guys develop this year and lose a lot of games.
Yeah.
I was gonna clarify. I think the Blazers, I had them like one tier above this. And that's not homerism. Max can attest. Like I love to hate on my favorite team, but just got a lot of veterans. Like DeAndre Ayton pisses me off beyond belief. I mean, he can't get an Uber when there's a little bit of ice outside his house, even though he makes 35 million a year. But like DeAndre Ayton, Jeremy Grant, who like for a guy with his counting stats has had some of the worst advanced stats of anyone in the league for a few years now, but it's still Jeremy Grant. Like Denny Avdia is going to help you win games. He's
Yeah,
a
about
he's
Denny.
he's a guy who contributes to winning. I think everyone expects Scoot to take a leap, whether you're lower on him than, I think most people are lower on him than you were pre-draft. But like then you compare his rookie stats to De'Aaron Fox's and Darius Garland's, and it helps add some perspective to the whole Scoot conversation.
Yeah.
I think Portland's just going to win a few more games than these teams. And when we get to the very bottom, these East teams are so bad that there is a significant leap from the Nets who might win 17 games to I think Portland could get somewhere in the 20s. But again, yeah, they're all going to be bad. And I do actually really believe that the Nets and Wizards are in a bottom tier of their own. I'm not yet ready to say that Cam Thomas can put up 27 per game and contribute to winning as
Cam
a
Thomas
starter.
puts up 27 a game. Like that. How many
Yeah,
shots
exactly. Yeah. And everyone who knows basketball seems to agree that Cam Thomas is a really talented player who will probably settle in as a really electric sixth man somewhere. You don't make that Bridges trade unless you're trying to be really, really bad right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And of those bottom ones, and I do agree, I think Utah's a much better team than those bottom of the East teams. I just think with how good the West is going to be, like the
That's fair.
13th best team in the West is probably San Antonio, and I think that they would push for a playoff spot in the East. So Utah, unfortunately, is just, I think, going to be the victim of that, despite Will Hardy being a great coach and Laurie being, top 30 player in the NBA. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think the one I'm most interested out of that group is also Portland, just because I want to see what their young guys look like. Year three, Shaden Sharp. Does he put together his athletic tools and skill into something that looks real, or is it still just flashes?
Sean, can I ask you, as a Blazers fan, I need to know how much has your opinion on Scoot changed? I don't know. Did you have him 2 or 3 after
I
Brandon
had him
Miller?
too.
Yeah,
I had
okay.
him too. And I had him so definitively number two. I slandered Charlotte for not taking him.
So did
Like,
Yeah.
we.
Oh, I,
I,
I was I was ecstatic.
yeah, because the whole point throughout the draft cycle was, oh well, you don't want to get another ball handler next to Lamelo, and I'm like, dog, you need multiple ball handlers on a team to compete now. Like that's
Yeah.
just a pretty known fact. And Brandon Miller within a couple of weeks maybe looked like an idiot. Like, oh okay, yeah. It wasn't me
Yeah.
knocking Brandon Miller, but I feel like I have to apologize now every time I talk about the subject. But
Mhm.
I think Scoot. I mean, obviously, the opinions lowered a little bit. I don't know if there is truly superstar point guard in there, but
Mhm.
he can be a top 15 point guard in the league still. I think there were still flashes, especially post All-Star break, if I recall correctly. And then I mean DeAndre Ayton, that contract sucks, but admittedly, their 2-man game with Scoot and DeAndre Ayton legitimately kind of got going a little bit. And the biggest thing that I need Scoot to develop, I don't even need the three to really come around. Can we take out? He has some really weird turnovers, just weird ball security even sometimes. So I don't know. I still really really like Scoot. Just don't know if it's superstar point guard right now. But could
Yeah.
prove me wrong.
I'm glad that we're keeping some vets around him. Jeremy Grant might be a Laker in a couple months. I don't really know. I haven't done a deep dive on the money situation. I don't think we should hold on to these quality players for too long. You got to bottom out if we're really rebuilding around, Scoot, hopefully Denny Avdia, and now Klingon. Like that, I like that young core. Obviously Shaden as
Yeah.
well. Yeah, I mean Shaden's talent is still number one in the organization. But I like that we're keeping some adults in the room for now because, like you said, it was a really messy first 2/3 of Scoot's rookie year. And you can't just expect to have the worst coach in the league and put a point guard out there and say he's so talented he'll just figure it out. I like you said, I still think that I see a clear path to a De'Aaron Fox caliber
Mhm.
point guard, which is still super valuable. But yeah, it is harder to see the superstar ceiling that I think the vast majority of evaluators saw in him pre-draft. And maybe he'll change that perception quickly. Who knows?
Yeah. All right, let's move to the next tier. Drew, who do you have in your tier above those five teams you mentioned?
Yeah, so this is where I had the Blazers at the bottom of this tier, and I didn't really order it outside of this.
Mhm.
But this tier, we had Blazers at the bottom, Raptors, Spurs, Hornets, and Hawks. And I'll just say this about the Hawks. they were a team that I like, a kind of a hipster team. I was like, maybe it'll be fun to like take the over on the Hawks after they made the DeJounte trade because I'm a huge Dyson Daniels guy. I like his fit next to Trey.
Hmm.
I'm low on DeJounte in the way that he fits into teams as like a ball first guy who doesn't really seem to be happy in any situation now for a couple years. But you just go through the East and it's like what the Hawks have right now just isn't going to come close to cutting it unless Jalen Johnson just takes like a mammoth leap, which he's capable of. Like his talent is off the charts. But yeah, this group for me is Atlanta, Charlotte, San Antonio, Toronto, and Portland.
Did you have Detroit in your bottom tier?
I had Detroit with the Bulls and the Jazz in the tier
Okay.
below this and above the Nets and Wizards, Vegas and Seattle tier.
We've basically got the same teams. I had Detroit in this sort of current, like bad but not atrocious tier. I split it into two of teams who I think realistically could push for the play-in, like make a run for the 10 seed basically, which I think is Atlanta, San Antonio, and Toronto. I can see that happening. And then the bad but not atrocious, I see Detroit and Charlotte, where they can be sort of fun to watch on a nightly basis, maybe win in the low 30s of games, but they're not going to be like contention for the number one pick, I think. Sean, do any of those teams that Drew just mentioned kind of stick out to you as potentially being fun or interesting this year?
This is, I think, like you guys said, like the right list of no matter how you order it. Like these are the bottom 10 or whatever. I think we got 10 teams now.
Yeah.
Kind of like bottom 10 of the league. I think everybody essentially in that like frisky could maybe make a play-in team tier is going to be somewhat fun. Like I think Charlotte, at least for the beginning of the year, is going to be a fun watch if LaMelo can, for the love of God, stay healthy.
Hmm.
Seeing Brandon Miller in year two will be fun. Like hopefully Mark Williams is good to go. And then you look at Atlanta because I think first I did their power rankings episode pretty recently, and their over under odds I think is kind of a joke. It's like 35 and a half I think per FanDuel, and I said like I'm hammering that because if this team's healthy, Trey
Yeah.
plays north of 65 games. Jalen Johnson, you could just copy paste the same player from last year. This team is for sure like at least a 35 win team. It's like the ninth best team in the East or whatever. I think Quinn's a really good coach. And I think actually this year's team maybe does have the in air quotes firepower as last season because like you lose DeJounte. But this team just makes more sense than last year's team did, where we can let Trey beat Trey, who I think is a very underrated player at this point. And we got better. We have like not a fake defender in DeJounte with next to him. We have Dyson Daniels, who projects to be a really, really good defender. So I like Atlanta. I'm lower on Toronto, I think. They're in this tier for me, but I'm a little bit lower. But that's simply because I don't trust. I mean, I don't trust. I'm a little bit more skeptical on the quickly leap as a lead guard. And RJ was fun at the end of last season, but can we get like a full year of that? So that's why I'm not really able to buy in on Raptor stock quite yet. But
Yeah.
this is basically my tier for sure.
Yeah, on the last episode, I think it was the last episode we did, Drew, you talked about RJ's stats after being traded to Toronto, and the percentages are really nice. And I remember what I wanted to say at the time was as a Knicks fan, I have a lot of memories of like 2 month stretches or 1 month stretches where RJ is hitting 40% of his threes. Mainly it's the three that comes and goes. And like, getting to the rim more effectively, getting to the line more effectively. And it just seems like he can do it for like a third of the season, but as Sean said, we
Yeah.
haven't seen him be able to do it for an entire season. I love Quickly. He was extremely fun to root for when he was a Knick, and I am curious to see if he can make that leap towards like, the sort of stat wise, I guess like 22, 5 and 7 or something like that, or 25 and 7. I think that's realistic for him this year. And yeah, they have like a real professional starting lineup. Which is more than we could say for some of these bottom teams. But like IQ, I assume Grady Dick will be their starting two, although there's a
Yeah.
little bit of Agbaji noise.
Are we doing the Agbaji experiment again? Hold on, let me readjust my rankings and drop them again.
So we have
Yeah.
IQ, Grady, RJ Barrett, Scotty, Jakob Pertl. Like those are
It's
a
a real
lot.
starting five.
Yeah, that's a real starting five. A lot of those guys would start on, or at least be like in the top 6 or 7 on playoff teams. We'll see what Grady looks like in his second year, but
Yeah.
I do want to quickly hit on Detroit because I do think they're going to be better this
Yes.
year.
I agree.
They have like a real team now. A Cade Duran pick and roll surrounded by Malik Beasley, Simone Fontecchio, and Tobias Harris. Like that's at least real offense. You have three shooters around. I think Cade is a really skilled pick and roll operator. Like his numbers might not be insane, but when you watch him, he's really great at manipulating the defender,
Hmm.
getting to his spot at the elbow. He's one of the better mid-range scorers in the league already. And Duran, at least offensively, is a really talented finisher and rebounder. I don't love him defensively, but offensively, he's got a lot of upside. So I think the addition of the shooting, it's going to do a lot for Cade. Same for Ivy if he gets some run under this coaching staff. Both Drew and I were pretty high on Ivy coming out of the draft, but it's kind of a little bit reaching make or break for him in terms of like, is he going to be a fringe star level guy? You know, he's got a long way to go in terms of is he an NBA player, but can he get to sort of the Oladipo level that I thought he could maybe get to coming out of college, although the game's very different, but like that level of player. So, and then on top of that, just in terms of from an interest perspective, I love both Asar and Ron Holland. They're horrible fits on this
Yeah.
team, but I love them both as players. Holland was my number one in this class.
He's the number two.
Yeah, and Asar, I had five last year, like most people, but they're very similar players. Neither can shoot, which isn't great around Cade, but just want to see what they look like. So they'll be interesting at least.
So the Pistons are probably the team that benefited the most from like my film watches before their power rankings episodes. Because Cade against another guard, I think is like super underrated. But I feel like it's his is a little bit different because I think for the most part, NBA fans know that Cade's pretty good, but I think not a lot of people are watching Pistons games, and rightfully so. I'm not faulting anybody for that. But like if you go watch like a Cade game, you like really see like kind of stuff you described. Like he has some of the best pace of like any guard in the league. It's very SGA, Jalen Brunson-y, if that makes sense. So kind of
Yeah.
their herky jerky type styles and how you can't. It's really really hard to speed them up, and they're gonna play at their own pace, and then they kind of like dictate the flow of the game. Like I said, great pick and roll operator. As bad as Jalen Durant is on defense, like you say, he's a really good offensive player for them. Like his 2 man game with Cade's nice. And I'm a little bit higher on the Pistons. I have them 24th in my series, but
Same.
yeah, it's a fun team to watch. I have them above the Raptors actually. So I really really like this Pistons squad.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm kind of sold. I don't think I thought long and hard enough about Detroit because I've been a Cade guy for years now. Like I still think he's one of the best young players in the league. Max and I have been talking about doing it was Max's idea for a segment, a rescue draft, just like guys we need to get
Oh
out of current situations. And both Cade and Ivy are in that boat. And like Cade has shown way more. I think
It's
I
like the
felt
whole
more right.
Pistons team.
Yeah, I felt more right about Cade based on the flashes in the NBA. But it seems to me like Jaden Ivey is becoming now one of the more underrated talents in the league. And I'm not saying that he's been awesome and people like aren't giving him credit. It's just like the downhill special driver athlete and like at least shooting flashes are there.
Can you
And like,
name five
yeah,
players that are faster with the ball in their hands than Jaden Ivey?
Probably
Like
not.
I don't,
De'Aaron
yeah.
Fox,
Maxi,
Tyrese
Fox.
Maxey.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Maxi is one of those guys. I think if Maxi and Ivy lined up on a track next to each other, Ivy would dust him. But you put the ball in Maxi's hands, and suddenly he's like Messi. You know, he's one of those
Yeah.
guys.
Well, let's keep it moving. Curious if this is the same for you, Drew. My next six teams are all West teams. Is that the same for you? And this is not in terms of quality, but in terms of like likelihood to make a playoff run, just because the West is so crowded.
No, I
Okay.
have a massive tier now, a tier four.
So is this like 20 to like 13 probably
Yeah,
then?
20 to 12, 20 to
Yeah,
Yeah.
11.
Okay. So like this is again very similar to mine at least. Where like this tier at least is like it's massive. This is I think my biggest tier actually.
Yeah, this is basically the can we escape the play-in tier. And all these teams, well, some of them, like the Rockets and Kings, are probably would be happy to be like an eight seed. And then some of them are definitely internally aiming for a 6 seed and would be disappointed if they weren't. But
Yeah.
yeah, we can honestly we can I had these split into two, but we can discuss them all as one. So, or Drew, why don't you name your teams actually, because you have more.
This tier includes all of Cavs, Pelicans, Kings, Pacers, Warriors, Rockets, Heat, and the Clippers. And they're all there for
Oh,
different reasons.
you have the Lakers higher.
I have the Lakers higher, and my I have this tier three of three teams, my 10 through 12, that I just think that tier. I didn't give specific labels for each of these tiers, but that tier three I have that includes the Lakers is three teams that I think could beat anyone in the league in a single series.
So for me, at least, my tier four is I described as like play. These are teams that have playoff hopes, whether it's using the play-in route to get there, or it's like you said, like using that 6 seed. Um, Only team for me actually that I disagree with is the Pacers. That's the only team I disagree with. I had the Pacers in like that tier above them technically, but everybody else I like pretty. I like yeah, I agree with that list for the most part.
I want to start with the Rockets just because I think this could be one of the most fun teams in the league this year. Um, I probably shouldn't lead with their bench, but I'm in love with their bench unit of I assume it'll be Reed Shepherd, Amen Thompson, like Cam Whitmore, Tari Eason, and Steven Adams. I just think that unit's going to be so fun. Like Reed and Amen is my favorite in terms of fit young backcourt pairing in the league, where you have
Mhm.
Reed, who's just like A plus shooter, passer, really good ball handler, and like defensive playmaker. And then you have Amen, whose weaknesses are Reed's strengths in terms of shooting, but just like maybe the best pound for pound athlete in the whole NBA. And I really want to see what that looks like with Steven Adams just vacuuming up every available rebound, assuming they don't trade him, because there's going to be a lot of teams in the market for a center, and he's one that could be traded, I think. But Adams vacuuming up every rebound with Reed running the break with the 2, 3, 4 athleticism of Amen, Cam Whitmore, and Tari Eason. Like that's just going to be so fun to watch. And for teams coming into Houston on like the second night of a back to back, they are going to be an absolute pain to play against. I think they're going to be one of the better defensive teams in the league. Last year they were 10th in defense, and that's with a really young team and a first year with Ime Udoka. I'm expecting them to be closer to like the 6 or 7 range this year. So if that offense, the problem is the offense. If the offense is like bottom five again, then they're going to be where they were last year. But if they get that offense more in the 15 to 20 range, then they really could spoil things for one of these, like particularly one of these California teams of Lakers, Clippers, Warriors, Kings that might not have as much prowess in the regular season. They could find themselves very easily on the outside looking in at the play-in. So that from like at least the bottom of that tier is the team I'm most excited for this year.
I hear you on the Rockets. They strike me as a team that won't be exactly elite in any area, but could be around like top 12 offense and defense and will be really fun in transition, especially with Şengün starting stuff out. But yeah, this is also the beauty of the NBA installing the play-in system because 12 to 20, this is kind of exactly that range of teams that can kind of talk themselves into trying to compete, maybe making a trade deadline deal to like become more competitive. Who stands out to you guys in this tier besides the Rockets?
Um,
Well, you said the Pacers are too good for this tier. Can you give me your Pacers pitch?
yeah, I just think that last season, first off, I think they got better. I think they got better, like adding, not even really adding. I think just like keeping this group together. Went to the Eastern Conference Finals, and Halliburton pre-injuries, like up until basically December, was probably like the third best point guard in the league. If we're considering SGA a point guard, then it's Luka, and then it was him, or like Luka SGA, whatever, right? But then it was him, like legitimately. Um, I'm banking on like the Pascal fit. At times it felt a little clunky, but I'm banking like they've been in the gym a lot together as a group this summer. And I think for sure in the regular season, they're just gonna be able to outrun everybody. I fully buy into that, like being the regular season identity. But then also come playoff time, like they when they needed to, they were able to kind of buckle down a little bit more defensively. Nemhard's a perfect fit next to Hallie, and they can kind of, especially now they paid him all that money, they kind of need to, they have more reason to kind of give Nemhard more offensive touches, which can kind of in-game low manage Hallie too, and not have him, not stress him too much. Pascal, I love Jarris Walker, one of my favorite players in that 23 draft class. The only bad thing is they paid Obi Toppin now, so I'm a little worried that Jarris Walker isn't going to get as much playing time, especially with Carlisle being there. But I just trust that core of like legit 10 guys. Hallie's a real superstar, in my opinion. And again, that team, because I was having a conversation with somebody about them versus the Cavs, for example, right? And why I feel way better about the Pacers than the Cavs, for an example. And I'm just convinced that Cavs situation isn't going to work out. And I would actually prefer that the Cavs kind of hit that red nuke button and, all right, let's trade Jared Allen, let's trade Darius Garland. Because at the end of the day, like, I think for their upside or whatever, Evan Mobley needs to be the 5. And you need a non-ball handler next to Donovan Mitchell. Because that's where Darius Garland thrives. He thrives with the ball in his hands, and that pairing just hasn't really worked. Whereas the Pacers, that team just makes sense. They have great complementary skill sets. I trust Rick Carlisle a lot. And yeah, that's kind of my pitch on the Pacers.
On the Cavs, I don't know if I agree with you that they need a non-ball handling one, but they need someone who's comfortable in his skin, like a vet Mike Conley play next to Ant,
Sure.
to say like
That's fair.
I can stir the drink if you need me to, but I'm also comfortable like hitting catch and shoot threes, playing
Yeah, that's the
defense,
better
doing
point.
everything else.
Yeah.
Just because, yeah, I know that isn't exactly what you were saying, but Donovan Mitchell doesn't quite have those like point guard initiation instincts that I
Yeah.
think every playoff offense needs at least as an option. But yeah, that's interesting. I like that you paired those two teams because I think they have the interesting parallel of having really talented guards and a couple really talented front court players and some questions in like the wing room. And Max and I are both huge Jalen Tyson fans, this rookie that the
Mm-hmm.
Cavs just took in the middle of the first round. But I don't think that he's going to like change the script for them in year one. I'd
No.
love to see him be like the rare rookie who contributes in a playoff game, but it's just, those guys are few and far between. I guess my big reservation with Indiana is just the backcourt defense. As much as I like Nemhard and he's competitive, he took on some of the toughest matchups for them during the exciting playoff run last year. It's just the Halliburton Nemhard combination defensively is giving me a little bit of Dame and CJ McCollum PTSD. Like it's
Mhm.
just not a lot of force at the point of attack. And it puts a lot of pressure on their larger defenders who are quality defenders, but like Siakam and Turner aren't the type of guys that can totally make up for point of attack deficiency.
Yeah.
And
Can
and
we
their
agree
defense,
that,
as fast as they are, that defense was often just a complete wet blanket last
sure.
year.
Can we agree that Andrew Nimhart is easily like the best defender out of those 4 guards you mentioned, though?
Yeah, including Dame and CJ,
Damon's
definitely.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, totally. He is. But Halliburton's bad. And
Halliburton is bad.
yeah, and I don't know if his health had anything to do with it, but he was attacked relentlessly last year and didn't show a lot of pushback.
Yeah.
Sure.
I love Nemhard. Again, he's super competitive, but I just
Aaron Smith?
uh
They're hoping
yeah.
it's, well, I mean, they're hoping it's Matherin, probably. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
Neesmith, I mean, the Knicks were completely broken down by the time game 3 of that series rolled around, but he still gave Brunson as much issues as anybody in the playoff run that the Knicks had. And yeah, I mean, in terms of chances of making like a legitimate finals run or Eastern Conference finals run, I'd probably have the Pacers eighth in the East, but I have them, Cleveland, and Miami kind of all right next to each other. It's very hard to differentiate between those three. Um, while we have Sean, the resident Lakers fan, I have to ask, because Drew, you have the Lakers above this tier. I am guessing that your rationale from that is that of all these teams, because they have two top 10 players, they can beat anyone or potentially any two teams in a playoff series, which I get and I'm on board with. My issue is I think there's a good chance they miss the playoffs.
Yeah.
Where would you have them? You don't have to spoil your power ranking, but would you have them in this kind of this tier or above? And where do you think they are compared to last year?
So I have them in the next tier. that Drew has them in. Although my next tier is also pretty big as well. Where like this tier
Interesting.
is more like playoff hopefuls, like I said earlier, for me at least, and then the next tier is like pretty comfortable playoff locks in my opinion. Like if things like if the bare minimum happens, which is like health, right? I think this team's healthy. Braun plays 60ish games. AD's like around the 70 range again, like he's been for a couple years now. I think this team's a playoff team. Now, I think there are a lot of variables I would even say that like, and this is why I think the next year is the perfect spot for them. Um, there's a lot of variables for me that push them from being okay, like we're for sure probably a playoff team. This team's healthy. That can, like Drew said, beat almost anybody. Very matchup dependent team for sure. There's some variables I think. Like, is JJ Redick a good coach year one? Like, I think a lot of Laker fans are automatically assuming he's going to be better than Darvin Ham, and Darvin's pretty bad, but like we just don't know that JJ's going to be better than Darvin Ham because he's literally never coached anything ever. It's already hard enough with assistant coaches, like for example, like a Nets, for example, Jordy Fernandez. That's the first assistant hire that I could think of. It's already kind of hard. Like you can maybe do some digging and find out what his job was in Sacramento, but like it's you literally have no clue with JJ. The role player health, like Braun and AD were both healthy last year. They both played 70 plus games. Austin played 70. No, Austin played the entire year. D'Lo played 75 or whatever. And they won 47 games because, yeah, the coaching sucked, but none of their other role players were healthy. So I completely understand that. You have two top 10 players, too. So I think it's
Yeah.
warranted.
Austin played 82. Shout out to him. I almost overreacted after the Olympics and said, like, come on. Like these guys at times were the two best players for Team USA. Then you take a step back, let the emotions die down. You realize LeBron is playing 20 something minutes per game. His fifth starter is Devin Booker. The fact that D'Lo is in the conversation for fourth best player on the Lakers is very scary. And
Careful, you
LeBron,
have the D'Lo
yeah,
stands will come after you.
that's okay. I want all of it. I can't with that guy. But I mean, still has one of the silkiest releases. I'm sad that D'Lo's like transcendent passing that he flashed at Ohio State still hasn't really popped consistently in the league. Like he's become such a score first guy, but D'Lo's vision as a prospect made him like one of my favorites for a while. And he didn't turn into the guy I was hoping he would become. But yeah, LeBron with with a green stamina bar, maybe even yellow, is still at times a top five player in the world. It's just the help isn't there. But again, round one with energy, if the roster stays healthy, could see them giving anyone trouble.
Yeah.
Even the Nuggets, who are weaker than the Nuggets team, that beat them in a sort of competitive 5 game series last year.
Yeah, I think so. When I was looking at them, I wanted to put them higher, and then I was part of the way I prepped for this was just seeing how I would rank the offenses and defenses in the NBA 1 to 30, and I looked a lot at last year's rankings to do that. And the Lakers had a worse net rating than Houston, than Sacramento, than Golden State. And they outperformed that in part because LeBron is super clutch and they would get into these tight games and he would just like find a way to pull them out. Like I can't remember, was the Utah game last year or 2 years ago where they were in Utah and he just had a ridiculous stretch at the end of the game. I'm putting you on the spot, but I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, but
Utah game?
I feel like he was wearing number 6, so it might have been 2 years ago. But
Might have been two
anyways,
years ago. Oh,
regardless,
Utah game. I think it was 2 years ago. Yeah, my
they
bad.
they outperformed the like barely the positive net rating. They had the lowest positive net rating in the NBA.
Mm.
And I worry that if that doesn't bump up that much, they might not get the same fortune with making the playoffs, even with that profile. I do think, though, that if you could wave a wand and turn D'Angelo Russell and Rui Hachimura into like Bruce Brown and Dorian Finney-Smith, which I don't think they have the draft assets to do. But if you made just a change like that, I think that team is a legitimate conference finals team.
It's
Um,
just not enough, man.
yeah.
This is wishful thinking. Like, I mean, give Rui some credit. Like Rui resuscitated his career. He's
For
an
sure.
important piece of what they do now. I thought you were gonna like give me some name I hadn't thought. Like I thought you were gonna say like a Jeremy Grant type guy, and just believe that Jeremy Grant in his prime as like the fourth option could be a huge upgrade for them. But
Yeah.
I don't think swapping them for two other role players that you think might contribute to winning more and play playoff basketball in a better way is going to move the needle.
I
I
just
just
think they
don't.
fit. I just think they fit better. And I watch a lot of Jason Timpf, and he's talked about this, but like Reeves and Russell are like very similar types of players, and they have a lot of
Mhm.
the same strengths and weaknesses. So like swapping Russell out for a guy who's actually like a real hard-nosed defender and more of a ball mover than a guy who looks to score, I think would be good. And swapping and Rui is like a very physical guy, much like LeBron is. He's not really a natural three. So swapping him out for a guy who's more comfortable both spotting up and then taking on the more like perimeter oriented defensive assignments. I think
Mhm.
even if the quality of players isn't that different, I just think that fits a lot better and it makes a lot more sense to the team. But yeah, regardless, this is a team that just like get them into the playoffs. And if even if they get into the play in, LeBron's undefeated in the play-in. So if they can just get there, they should be good.
Yeah. I think that team probably gets worse in the regular season, but again, like get this team into the playoffs, and I trust Bruce Brown and Dorian Finney-Smith a whole heck of a lot more than D'Angelo Russell and Rui Hachimura. So,
For sure.
um, yeah,
Yeah.
I can understand that.
All
All
right. So
right.
just to close the door on that tier, Clippers traded their whole franchise except for Kawhi for Paul George. Paul George is gone. The Heat, yeah, Heat culture, they deserve a shout at all times. Maybe Jovic pops. Rockets, we mentioned. Warriors, you want to talk yourself into it, but I think Kuminga and Bajemski just need a couple of years of development, and maybe they build something, but probably not before Steph is done. Pacers, we mentioned. Kings, can't believe that DeMar DeRozan at 35 would be the difference maker for them. Pelicans, I think, could be an interesting regular season team, but I just don't see the
Fun
playoff
team.
legs. Yeah, they'll be
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
But I'm as tired of is Zion skinny tweets as I am of offseason Ben Simmons, Chris Brickley saying it's different this time. Like those are two I just can't do anymore. And then the Cavs we mentioned as well. So Max had the Lakers in that tier I just mentioned. I did not. My tier three is the Lakers, the Suns, and the Orlando Magic.
Okay.
And
I'm
these are the three teams I said I think could beat anyone in a series if the chips fall the right way. But I just can't really picture them getting to the finals in any scenario.
yeah.
So I thought I was like one of the highest people on the Magic until today. Um,
I've got him 10.
I have Orlando in that tier below, but like
Okay.
towards the top of that tier. Like I have Orlando. I like Orlando a lot more than I do Cleveland, for example.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah,
Respect.
I think Orlando. I mean, it's semantics at the top. I'm picking them to have the second best defense in the league.
Yeah.
They were, I think, second or third last year, and they're swapping out from their starting lineup Gary Harris for KCP. Um, KCP is aging, but still a very good defender, good spacer. So I think their offense should hopefully get better as well with a year three leap from Paolo, perhaps. And if Franz's shooting can regress a bit more to what it's been like over his career and not what it was like last year and at the Olympics, and then continued development from Suggs, maybe Anthony Black gets a little bit more play. It's just a young ascending team, and I think that defense is just going to be absolutely hellacious. So they're a team that I could see like we look up in the second round, one of those top four in the East isn't there, and Orlando has snuck their way in, and
Yeah.
everyone's freaking out about the team that didn't make it.
So I got Orlando with in my tier one of defenses for sure, which is 1 to 3. I think them, OKC, Minnesota right now would be like my top three defenses heading into
Same.
next year.
No
Uh,
Boston?
Boston's at the top of that very next. Yeah, Boston's literally 4
Okay. Okay.
for me at least. Orlando. Oh, I guess for Orlando, like I think it's going to happen, but I'm like being cautious, and that's the I guess like honestly my best reason why like I have them a little bit lower and like in that And that tier below, like I said, towards the top of that tier. Um, and then again, I personally still think right now, like heading into the season, I feel better about an Indiana than an Orlando, for example. And I hate keep like going back to Indiana, but Indiana's kind of like the benchmark for me. We're like, okay,
Yeah.
how do I feel about you as a team heading into next year? And right now, I just feel a little bit more safe with Indiana. And also, this tier for me, like I said, is pretty big. So it's like this is my, like I said, playoff lock tier. So there's also like a lot more teams in this tier that I just feel way better about.
For me, it's simple. I don't want to overthink it with the Magic. Like, I loved Anthony Black. I had him at 3 in that class, but that's not a huge part of this. For me, it's their 3 best players are getting better. Like, I expect at least a small improvement from all 3 of Paolo, Franz, and Jalen Suggs.
Mhm.
Um, and they added like KCP's 32. He is aging, but that also we've seen 32-year-old vets with playoff experience play the best basketball of their careers, especially with like modern medicine and the way guys are aging right now. They don't have a weakness defensively, as you mentioned. And this is just one of those young teams that's just going to throw so many live bodies at you. Like, just think about a theoretical series that will never happen, like Lakers Magic. They will just drain you of your energy. I mean, LeBron and AD could be fully healthy, somehow playing 40 minutes a night, and the Magic's depth and relentlessness will still just catch up to you over the course of a 7-game series. Like, I haven't even mentioned Jonathan Isaac, who per minute might be the best defender in the league.
Yeah.
So, like a theoretical lineup, like they could legitimately go Jalen Suggs, KCP, Franz Wagner, Paulo, and Jonathan Isaac,
Mhm.
Yeah.
and like not like miss a beat. That's insane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we haven't been talking about culture a lot, but like this team seems to really, really love competing for each other. And like
Yeah.
Mosley just has them locked in. And that counts for something. Who knows what the Cavs are going to look like with Kenny Atkinson? So many of these teams culturally are sort of in flux. Like I'm going to shock you with how high I am right now on the Sixers, but I don't know how they're going to mesh. It's a first year team. Tier 2 for me.
Okay.
I ordered it, but I need more time to think about it, man.
So this is
It's
the
a
top 10 now, right?
Pretty much.
Yes. So this is for me, this is teams 3 through 9.
Okay.
The Wolves are at 9 for me.
Okay.
I'm expecting a slight step back for the Wolves. Nuggets at 8, and
Oh my God.
I feel horrible about it, but I'm just speaking my truth right now. I got the Grizzlies at 7.
Uh-huh.
Okay, we'll get into that. Bucks at 6, Knicks at 5,
Okay.
Mavs at 4, and Sixers at 3.
Wow.
And trust me, I'm not just like a dude who like checked everyone's rating on 2K and is dropping like his power rankings for the season. I know some of these takes are a little bit shocking. I spent a few hours looking at this today, and this is where I ended up.
So
Um,
wait, 5, 4, 3. Sixers are at 3. I know that for sure.
Sixers 3, Mavs 4, Knicks 5, Bucks 6, Grizzlies 7, Nuggets 8, Wolves 9.
Okay.
Um,
So
There's
just
a lot of projection going on this list.
right off the bat, so the ones I disagree with most, and then I'll let Sean go. So I have the Nuggets at 4.
mhm.
Um,
Not
I
exactly.
think
Okay.
I think they still the best player in the world. I don't believe Jamal Murray is as bad as we saw him play for Team Canada. Like we've seen him be great. He's gonna be fine.
Bar set
Um,
real low there.
yeah, they're much more reliant on MPJ and Jamal Murray than they ever have been with KCP's departure, and their bench is probably the worst bench of any serious playoff team. But I still think, like, I mean, Jokic dragged a bunch of guys who were out of the NBA within 2 years to a 6 seed. Like,
Yeah.
they're going to be a top 5 seed. And when you get into the playoffs, he's a nearly unsolvable problem. Um,
When you said he dragged a bunch of guys, I thought you were talking about Serbia for a second.
no, a lot of respect for the Serbs. Philly, I have at 9 in terms of a conference finals run, just because I don't trust Embiid to be healthy past game 5 of the first round. I'm gonna let once Drew gets to like hyping up Philly, I'm guessing it's gonna be a lot of Tyrese Maxey love.
Sure.
And those are my biggest disagreements. Everything else, I'm pretty much within like a spot or two. Oh, and then I have the Knicks at 3. and
We
that's
don't want
not.
to hear that. You're not allowed to talk about the Knicks at 3.
I will
Uh,
defend it, but let's start with
Sean, by the
which
way, Sean's face when I listed those teams was I wish we were like live on YouTube. That was great.
what shocked you the most from what Drew just read, Sean?
For me, it was Minnesota at 9.
Hmm.
Okay.
I have Minnesota higher. And it is like with this group. Okay, let me start by this. This is, regardless of the order, my exact 3 through 9. Like these are like that second class of NBA teams or whatever, right? Even though
Yeah,
like my 9 through 6 technically creep into that next tier, but regardless, this is like the second class of NBA teams or whatever.
yeah,
Um, so you are doing like projecting with almost all these teams. I mean, literally every team in the you're projecting right now. Um, I'm with Minnesota for me, it's more so I think Anthony Edwards is a top 20 player right now. I cannot get behind any top 10 talk. Any top 10 talk with Ant, I think it's kind of ridiculous.
We're on the
Uh,
same page.
okay. But I think he's clearly a top 20 player with like insanely clear, and I am projecting with this one, insanely clear like steps forward to where he could take that next step and no hyperbole here. He could be a top 8 player next year. And if he's a
Yeah.
top 8 player next year, they're right back to being one of the 3 best teams in the West again. I love Jade. I love Jay McDaniels. The flashes of the offensive game have always kind of been there, and he's kind of like teasing us at this point with it instead of like fully like really breaking out on that end. Cat, I think it's like really established himself, and like he's already been established, but like really like getting comfortable with this being his role, and like, hey, I'm like the number 2 option on this team, and that's like perfectly
Yeah.
fine with me. Had I think a really good playoff run. And there were games like even stretches of games, even at times where he was their best player. And that's saying something in my opinion. The combo of not Jada, Jay McDaniels and Rudy Gobert plus Ant, who I think has deficiencies defensively, especially off ball, but Ant as an on ball defender, combined with what Jaden can do, combined with Rudy, combined with like Nickeil Alexander Walker and the other pieces, they're a top 3 defense for me. So all of that kind of like added up to it for each other. I have them higher. And then the other one was Denver. That's probably the other more shocking one
yeah.
because like when you bump those up for me, the other ones kind of naturally fall. Like obviously, right? So like the other ones I understand. My thing with Denver is like kind of like Max said, best player in the league, top 3 coach in the league, and all we're really looking for is Julian Strother, Christian Brown, or Payne Watson. I mean, it'd be great for 2 of those guys, but for sure, give me one. And
Hmm.
this team's right back to being kind of what they've been for 3 years now when they're healthy, which is one of the 3 best teams in the Western Conference. So that's kind of where I'm at. The rest of the list, like when you like reallocate spots, makes sense. I don't really trust Milwaukee yet, though. Milwaukee for me, I just don't and will ever never trust Doc Rivers. And then Giannis has sneaky injury problems now. They're very sneaky. They don't get talked about a ton, but he'll have this nagging injury, like the hand. Was it hamstring? Was it knee with Giannis
Calf.
last year?
Last year it was
Calf.
calf, and then it was the block charge where he landed on his back the year before.
Yeah. So very sneaky. You can maybe chalk this up as flukes, but it's something like he's have like the corner of your eye like peeking at. So that's kind of my reason. But the rest of this, like I said, it's the exact 3 through 9 teams, just swapping the order.
Yeah, so couple quick things on those teams. One with Denver, I was surprised to see they were sixth in defense last year. They
It's good
they've
defense. They're a good
yeah,
team.
you gave Mike Malone a lot of props there, calling him a top 3 coach in the league. He's definitely one of the best. And he's really figured out how to get the most out of this scheme with Jokic, who's not a traditional like defensive anchor as a center, but they have a lot of athleticism and length around him. And the past few years they've been a top 10 to 12 defense, so it's not a fluke that they were a top 6 defense last year. So yeah, I'm expecting them to still be around the top 5 or 10 in both offense and defense again this year. Yeah, Minnesota, I had them at 7. I think I'm just not very high on their playoff offense. And we saw
Sure.
it was good enough to beat Denver, and they were able to attack some of Denver's defensive weaknesses. But then we saw against Dallas especially in these clutch situations, they just couldn't keep up with what Luka and Kyrie were doing, which, those are two of the most clutch players of all time. But still,
If I ask a question right quick,
yeah.
does Anthony Edwards take a leap? This is like a little question. Does Anthony Edwards take a leap as a playmaker and decision maker? Keyword decision. Let's just say decision maker in general.
Um, I hope so. I
Because if the answer is no, or like even if it's a marginal leap that counts as no, then like the ranking is justified.
yeah.
Because I think that's the probably the biggest thing for me at least is holding him back from being in that
Yeah.
top 8 to 12 range is the decision making with shot selection as a playmaker, kind of like bundling those two together. If he takes a leap from being uh average to slightly like probably like he was a below average one, even like decision maker in total, right? And now he's a even a slightly above average decision maker and playmaker, where there's like, but there's a noticeable leap taken there. Then that's where again I'm maybe slightly
Yeah.
projecting, and that's why I do have them higher.
Yeah.
So let me get in here. When I got to this tier, I was thinking a lot about like championship ceiling, like weighing that very heavily. I picked the Wolves to beat the Suns in round one last year. Wasn't super high on the Wolves, but also wasn't really disrespecting them. A lot of it is the playoff offense, as Max mentioned. Some of it is the fact that
Mm.
Mike Conley is 36 years old. Rudy Gobert is 32 and is coming off some really weird Olympic vibes. But I shouldn't overweigh that. You're right. Anthony Edwards just turned 23, and I'm probably underrating his ability
Sheesh.
to expand his mind as the quarterback of an offense and not just like, an all-world scorer. But Anthony Edwards also gives me just like a little bit of like Lamar Jackson basketball court vibes. I'm not sure that Ant is ever going to be a guy who goes through his progressions, even like Cade, who we mentioned earlier. Like it's just he's a different type of guy with the ball in his hands. He's so tunnel vision when he wants to be in scoring mode, and has spoken in interviews about how like it's been so helpful to have Mike Conley because he doesn't have to think about getting anyone else involved. So I worry about the flow of their playoff offense. I am always a little bit worried about the general shooting, the fact that that Jaden McDaniels and Gobert have to play on the floor together, sometimes can clog things for them. And I think they had the sixth man of the year last year, but the bench has some real question marks. Let's hope the Nickeil Alexander-Walker jump was real. I really like Terrence Shannon Jr. I think he has a chance to give them real minutes. It's more operating on the idea that last year was like an outlier in the data set. If we ran last year's playoffs, the simulation a bunch of times, I'd say the Wolves are closer to like win a round and then they're out. And what they did to the Nuggets blows my mind to this day.
So,
Mm.
Drew, is your top West team in this tier Dallas? Do I have that right?
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about Dallas. Do we think they got better from last year with their additions? Especially like relative to the rest of the West. I think they might have the best regular season offense in the league. I think there's a chance for that with uh their starting lineup of Luka, Kyrie, Clay, PJ, and Derek Lively. Like turning Derek Jones into Clay defensively is going to have some major issues, and I worry about that a bit in the playoffs. But offensively, Luka and Lively running pick and roll with Kyrie waiting to get it and attack your rotating defense. Clay
Mm.
spacing. I was listening to Mark Cuban on the Jalen Brunson pod, who was talking about how, which was a very interesting interview, by the way, having Mark Cuban and Jalen Brunson go face to face. But he was talking about how they are betting on Clay being fresher in their system because basically he's just going to have to stand in the corner and he's not going to have to do all the moving around screens that he did in Golden State. I don't know if I totally agree with that and if he's going to love just being
Such a great
camp.
way to sell me on the Mavs.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
yeah.
basically like, yeah, we think Clay can be PJ Tucker. But
Yeah.
I do think that's a pretty unguardable offensive unit. And I do like their bench adds a lot of Najee Marshall, Quentin Grimes. Interested to see how he looks there because I do think he could be a good like backcourt guy next to Luka for spurts in terms of just guarding their best guard and being a quick trigger from three. Um, Maybe they get an Omax Prosper appearance this year. We both liked him as like a solid rotation guy coming out of the
Yeah.
draft. Didn't really play last year, but
That was
yeah,
devastating. Yeah, and part of me putting them at the top for at least Western teams in this tier is another year of experience for Derek Lively, who I had, I think, on my board right around where they picked him, but I think he exceeded everyone's expectations, even the people who were super bullish on him. Just another year to reflect on his playoff experience. I was one of the trolls who kind of believed that I'm not sure that Josh Green to Klay Thompson is a significant upgrade. But Klay is still a 40% high volume 3-point shooter. Like that is not nothing. And yeah, super excited about the Grimes acquisition. For me, it's just I think I doubted the Mavs last year after like the horrible let's lose at the end of the season to get our pick from 2 years ago. And Luca just made me feel like such a damn fool that even when I started with the Mavs a little bit lower on my list the last couple days, I was just like, God, Luca against this team, Luca against this. Like, I can't bet against this psychopath. I don't even love watching him so much. It's so heliocentric. He whines so damn much. I've seen all his moves, but like Luca with any help whatsoever is going to be a playoff problem. So, yeah, and there are interesting moves around the margins. Najee Marshall, if he can be, pretty close to what they got from Derek Jones last year, like this is an interesting supporting cast, and the top end talent is good enough that these ancillary guys can be maximized, I'd say.
yeah,
So kind of my thoughts on Dallas. I like this team in theory a lot more if you can guarantee if you tell me that the Clay thing is situational, especially come playoff time. Like if you're telling
yeah,
me come playoff time, our starting five is Luca, Kyrie, Clay, PJ, PJ, and Derek Lively, then I really don't feel good. But again, if it's like situational, it's okay. Hey, this series we need Najee to be our three, and we'll roll out PJ or roll out Derek Lively next to him. I feel way better about this team, and then
mhm,
they would be kind of more towards the top. And actually, that would probably help out my defense grade for them too a little bit too, because like I think Kyrie's actually underrated defensively. But again, if Clay's your 82 game plus 16 game starter, then that's putting even more of a like load on Kyrie defensively, where like or Clay's got to step up defensively and guard better players, but Clay's just cooked defensively and rightfully so. Like he had an Achilles injury and then an ACL injury right after, or flip flop that I think. Yeah, because Katie was Achilles, his was ACL, I think. But
yeah.
either way,
Yeah.
We should talk about the two Knicks, the Freudian slip, the two East teams that Drew and I have as number two in the East. Real quick on Dallas, yeah, I would not be surprised if in playoff games either Najee or even Quentin Grimes, if he has a bounce back year, is closing games for them over Clay if it's matchup dependent.
sure.
But also, Derek Jones was getting played off the floor in some of the later playoff rounds because teams just wouldn't
Sure.
guard him. So might not make that much of a difference to not have him on the team once they get
Yeah.
to that point.
And if there's anything that Luca can do on repeat in the playoffs, it's make the defense collapse on him and hit somebody in the chest for a corner three. And so like
Yeah.
if Cuban can convince Clay to play that way, like it is a good formula.
Yeah. All right. Let's quickly do this New York versus Philly thing. I think the top two teams we'll probably just touch on real quick, because
Yeah.
it's clearly OKC and Boston. Boston's the just won the title, walked to it basically, and brought back the exact same team. Only concern is Porzingis being hurt and Al Horford being in his
Yeah.
late 30s. Anything else on Boston, or just they're either the first or second favorite pretty firmly?
They are, I mean, spoiler, I guess, like my number one. But I think because of those things, and just because the East is deeper than it's been probably in some years now, one of those other two East teams could, I think, there's definitely a path for like Philly or New York to knock off a Boston for sure.
Yeah. Anything to add on Boston, Drew?
No. I think they
Okay.
they have the belt. They deserve this shout. They didn't lose anything significant. Yeah, they got to be number one.
Okay. I actually had OKC number one.
Wow.
I've been going back and forth all freaking off season.
Yeah.
'Cause OKC's my title pick. Like
Yeah.
they're my title pick.
I'm getting there as well. They just have a matchup for everyone. Like you have, Steph Curry, here's Alex Caruso. LeBron, here's Lou Dort. Luca, here's Lou Dort. A team with two wings. Lou Dort gets one, Jalen Williams gets the other. Um,
You
they
got
can
two bigs. All
throw.
right, cool. Chet, you guard the one, and Hart, you guard the other. Like,
Oh, you need a breather? Here's Case and Wallace.
Yeah.
hey,
Here's case.
you're tired. Here's Aaron Wiggins for you.
Yeah.
Like,
No, I
Exactly.
now you guys are making me feel like a fool for I put the Celtics one by default. But yeah, I mentioned with the Magic, like when your three best players are just young guys who are healthy and getting better, like that is a leap in itself. The one knock on the Thunder, I think they were top five offense and defense last year, and rebounding was like the one concern. They bring in Hardenstein, like you said, to just offer like seven new looks and lineup opportunities. And we haven't even started to talk about their bench. I mentioned Case and Wallace, but like they got Isaiah Joe and Aaron Wiggins on two of the
Joe.
most team friendly deals in the world. They check every single box.
Yeah.
And
They have a bad defender in their top eight. Like, oh, wait. Let me rephrase that.
Joe.
Actually, do they have like a
It's not
SGA?
even do they have a bad defender. Do they have a defender who's like just slightly above average? Like all of them
Right.
are great to elite.
Isaiah Joe,
Yeah, exactly. Shea's the
Yeah,
one who teams will probably look to attack, but he's still like a really disruptive guy to have on the court. And
yeah.
yeah, any weaknesses they had last year, like I looked it up, Lou Dort shot under 30% on twos in the playoffs. If he doesn't have it, like they can just pivot to a lineup of Shea, Caruso, J-Dub, Chet, and
yeah,
Isaiah Hardenstein. They can throw the Minnesota style defense at Denver. Like they turned their weakness into a strength. Domantas Sabonis and Nikola Jokic and Şengün are not going to bully Chet this year because they can put Hardenstein on him and have Chet roam off whoever else. Like, and when it comes down to it, they're clutch as hell. Shea and Jalen Williams in the regular season last year, two of the most clutch players in the league, both around 60% from the field in the clutch, on high volume too. And if it comes down to a hypothetical Thunder Boston series, which I think these are the two clear best teams in the league to me, I trust Shea more down the stretch than I do any individual player on Boston. So yeah, that's why I put them
yeah.
one.
It is an embarrassment of riches. I always felt like, as a Blazers fan, because Steph existed, that the world, at least the casuals, didn't have enough appreciation for prime Dame Lillard shooting. And I think Chet kind of has that dynamic with Wembanyama now. Like Chet had such an
Yeah.
insane year defensively, and then like backed it up in the playoffs, even if the rebounding wasn't always what it needed to be, like as a rim protector and like mover at his size is just so rare. And people aren't talking about it enough because Wembanyama's like a once every 20 years kind of player.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Chet is ridiculous. And now Chet on offense gets to explore the studio space a little more too, because he's going to get more minutes at the four. I can't believe I just used that expression, but
Yeah.
I'm
Okay,
proud of
Danny
myself.
LaRue. Um,
One last thing before we move on to that East battle. I have OKC in my top tier for defense is like I said, 1 through 3. They have like probably it's either them, in my opinion, like a Houston, the best bench in the NBA, and then they have a top 10 coach.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I mean,
I,
where the Nuggets are going to Peyton Watson and Julian Strawther, the Thunder are bringing on Isaiah Joe, potentially Lou Dort now with Caruso on the team. But like,
or
I
vice versa.
yeah,
or
I mean, they're
Hardenstein, whoever.
I knowing that culture, like Lou Dort is gonna have to get his job taken from him for all the wars he's fought for them.
Yeah, I've got OKC second in offense and first in defense, and that comes out to number one net. So let's do Drew. You lay out the Philly case, I'll lay out the New York case, and then Sean can decide where he stands.
I'm trying to correct against all of my anti Embiid bias. I've talked about it so much. I hated the body language. I wish that we could just get 1 year where he shows up lean. He's never going to look like he did at Kansas, and he shouldn't. He's put on a ton of muscle, but like it's clear that he's not in ideal shape, even in his prime. But healthy Embiid is still at times the best regular season player on planet Earth. And now, as Maxi enters his prime and does things that I don't think anyone thought Maxi was going to do when they drafted him in like the 20s, Embiid doesn't always have to be the dude. And like he's now at the point where he's gotten his MVP bucket. He could play 28 minutes per game in the regular season. And, Paul George is not I don't think absolute peak Paul George. I don't think that's a hot take, but like the Paul George we saw for the Clippers in that round one versus Dallas as a number three, that's a really good number three. And he's still a really high quality wing defender. Um, Let Embiid have his worst counting stats in the regular season he's had in 4 years. If it means that he is feeling better than ever heading into the postseason, I feel like a hypocrite because I docked the Nuggets so much for their depth, and I have depth questions with Philadelphia. But it's just this closing five is right up there. Like, and it's year one, and I feel scared betting on a team in year one with a completely new potion to like make it work. But Maxey, Paul George, Caleb Martin, Embiid, and then like, whoever's playing well can play the two, whether it's Kelly Oubre, Jared McCain. I haven't even mentioned Yabusele, who looks like he's an NBA player now. I just think this is the best big three in the NBA right now. It might not be enough, but I who has a big three better than Philadelphia?
Probably no one. Probably no one. All right, let me lay out the Knicks case and then Sean, take it
Okay,
whichever
see.
way you want to go to. Oh, okay. See, I like that. All right. My Knicks case is
The Philly.
last year. Last year they were seventh in offense and ninth in defense with only 23 games of OG, 46 games of Julius Randle, which Drew probably thinks is a good thing, and no Mikal Bridges. Um, you add in a full year, theoretically, of OG, although he is injury prone, but I think we'll at least get more than 23 games out of it. Um, Julius, who I think fundamentally changed the way that he played last year. And in the 14 games that him and OG played together, the Knicks were 12-2 and had a plus 24 net rating in almost 350 minutes, which is bonkers. Um, they probably have the best sixth and seventh men in the NBA. They've got Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo coming off the bench. Um, and I think Brunson played like a top 5 to 7 player in the league in the playoffs. What he did against Philadelphia going into the beginning of that Indiana series, I think it was 5 or 6 straight 40-point games in a row. Outplayed a, yes, albeit hobbled, Joel Embiid head to head. And he just gets better every year. I put out a tweet about this the other day, but every single year of his career, he's added something new. Like he added the mid-range pull-up, then he added like a spot up three. Then this past year, he really scaled up his pull-up three-point shooting. I think he's firmly a top 10 player, and you're adding in the best probably defensive wing duo in the league with Bridges and OG, a full season out of Julius Randle. And the only thing that gives me pause is that they don't have a backup center if Mitchell Robinson goes down. I am making this ranking under the assumption that they're going to find a way to trade for that at some point, whether it's Steven Adams or Goga Batadze or one of the Orlando guys or Robert Williams, someone who can come in and soak up minutes because they're probably going to go small a bit as well. But I just think this team is so talented. It's got a good chance to be top 5 in both offense and defense because they were pretty damn close last year with a really hobbled team.
Yeah, go get your PJ Gafford, but they don't have Nick Nurse, who I refuse to believe Nick Nurse isn't still like one of the best in the league.
So I think to start with the Nick Nurse point, I think Nick Nurse is still like top 5, top 6 in the league for sure. I think so. I like New York more, and to kind of like hammer the point home of how much I like New York. If you can guarantee me New York can like get a real backup big that can in a pinch even start like let's say Mitchell Robinson has to miss a game 2 and game 3 in a playoff series or whatever, right? If you can guarantee me that, they're like I don't know who that guy is even, right? But let's say that happens. I think the NBA Finals is New York and the Thunder. Like if they're both healthy, that's how much I like.
Wow.
That's how much I like the Knicks. I think Brunson right now, at least, we're going to give him the top 10 shine. I don't know if that's going to be the case at coming next year, but like he's absolutely deserved it based off like post Randall injury through that playoffs was insane. And I love how the media tried to overanalyze what was the game 1 and game 2 of Jalen Brunson in that Philly series. And then immediately like says, no, I'm just really good still. And I'm like solidifying my case as being one of the 10 or so best players on the planet. I really like Mikal Bridges, and this is honestly just where he should be best at. Where he had that really fun but albeit fluky stretch once he got to Brooklyn, where from trade when he got traded there on, he was, like a legitimate, for them at least, number one option. But I think last year kind of proved, like, in reality, Mikal is a guy that best case scenario can fluctuate from being your second option to your fourth option on some nights, and that's exactly what he's going to be here. Because I think they're going to involve OG quite a bit because of the money they just paid him. Obviously, Randall's still, if we're going pure talent, probably their second best offensive player. So you allow Mikal to kind of fluctuate, and then also I think you could tell he took less, he gave less effort defensively, I think, in Brooklyn last season, and don't blame him. I think that entire team did. So yeah, I really, really, really like the Knicks. Like you said, I mean, what team has a better sixth and seventh guy? I mean, again, depending on like the matchup, like OKC could have a better sixth and seventh guy matchup depending. But like outside of the team that I think is winning the chip this year, there's not a team in the league that has a better sixth and seventh guy coming off the bench. Don't worry about any of the I don't worry about them playing together at all. They play together in college. Literally, this is the Villanova Knicks, and this is a really, really good team. Really, really,
Really quick before I give it to Drew for the last word. I love their lineup flexibility. They can go Randall at the 5. They can go OG at the 5. Like all the different permutations they can do with those starting guys I mentioned, DiVincenzo and Hart. Like, their 6th and 7th guys were playing 48 minutes a game in the second round last year, and now they're going to be scaling down into like 20 to 25-minute roles. And I expect Brunson's efficiency to go way up too, playing more off ball. But Drew, last word, because Sean's been super generous with his time.
Nothing to add. I ranked them pretty high, also under the assumption that they would go find their gaffer, someone of that ilk, to plug the only real hole they have on the roster right now.
Philly's also insanely fun too. Not to I didn't talk about them at the time, but Philly's also they're pretty comfortably my third best team in the East for sure.
Sean, thank you so much for coming on and being so generous with your time. We really appreciate it. I'm mad that I didn't get to talk about the Grizzlies. Before you go, just tell me, where do you have the Grizzlies, or are you not there yet in your tiers?
I'm not there yet in my tiers, but they're in that same tier. Like I said, like your 3 through 9 is the exact same teams. And we love the Grizz shot. I've been kind of defending them on Twitter, but they're good. And John Morant might be an idiot at times off the court, but he's still a top 20 player, and this team has only won since he's been there. So
feels like a fever dream when he came back for like 8 games and they went 6-2 or whatever.
And again, he again improves. Like first game back, what was it, like 35 plus the game winner? Like come on.
Follow Sean on Twitter at Sean_Davy. That's Davis without the S. Sean_Davy.
Some jerk stole Sean Davis, so thank you. And then you guys go check out the Sports Headlines podcast or show on YouTube. That's where you can keep up to date with the entire power ranking series. I had to not skip, but like briefly summarize 20 through 18 so I can get through the rest of the series and complete it. But really, really fun series. And excited for this upcoming season. Thanks, fellas, once again for having me on, and look forward to potential episodes in the future. This was a ton of fun.
We'll be back soon. Peace.
Boris Dirk.